If you are over the age of 55, there is a specific, terrifying moment of silence that you know far too well. You are in the middle of a perfectly normal conversation. The words are flowing effortlessly. And then, suddenly, a completely familiar word, usually the name of an everyday object, a place, or a person, simply vanishes from your mind. You can picture it. You know what it does. You can feel the shape of it on the tip of your tongue. But the actual noun is just gone. You are told by doctors that this is just a charming, harmless symptom of getting older. But that is a dangerous, placating lie designed to keep you ignoring the rapidly ticking clock of your health span. This specific linguistic failure is the absolute earliest warning sign of a catastrophic energy crisis inside your brain, threatening to quietly erase your independence. Today, we are going to fix the biological bridge that connects your thoughts to your words using a precise, two-step amino acid protocol. For decades, the modern medical establishment has placed a massive, suffocating burden of guilt entirely on your shoulders. Every time you stumbled over a sentence, forgot your neighbor's name, or felt that icy panic of anomic aphasia, which is the clinical term for losing nouns, you were subtly conditioned to blame yourself. You were told that you were just getting older, that your genetics were finally catching up with you, or that you simply weren't doing enough arbitrary crossword puzzles to keep your mind sharp. What is infinitely worse is that you were told this while simultaneously being directed by government health agencies to consume a diet that was actively, aggressively dismantling the very neurological infrastructure required to speak. Think back to the sweeping dietary guidelines of the 1980s and 1990s. You were instructed to fear dietary fat and to heavily restrict dense, high-quality animal proteins, replacing them with massive, overwhelming amounts of highly processed, industrialized cereal grains and refined carbohydrates. It is absolutely crucial that you understand right now, in this exact moment, that the terrifying cognitive slips you are experiencing are not your fault. You have been the unwitting victim of a generational systemic failure in nutritional science. You have been forced to survive in a physiological environment that actively starves your brain of the precise, microscopic biological building blocks it requires to maintain its structural integrity and synthesize the chemical messengers that allow you to communicate. The burden of blame stops right here, today. We are going to completely dismantle the paralyzing fear surrounding your cognitive decline by looking deeply, rationally, and scientifically into the elegant mechanics of your own neurological system. To truly understand why you are specifically losing nouns, and not verbs or adjectives, we must take a fascinating journey deeply into the microscopic architecture of your brain's language centers. When you want to speak a sentence, your brain does not simply pull a fully formed phrase out of a single file cabinet. Language generation is an incredibly complex, highly synchronized ballet that requires the flawless, instantaneous communication between several distant regions of your central nervous system. Deep within the left hemisphere of your brain lies a highly specialized region known as Wernicke's area, which is the absolute master control center for language comprehension and meaning. A few inches away, towards the front of your brain, sits Broca's area, which is the mechanical control room that actually orchestrates the complex physical movements of your jaw, your tongue, and your vocal cords to produce sound. Connecting these two vital centers is a massive, highly trafficked neural superhighway composed of millions of thickly insulated nerve fibers, known clinically as the arcuate fasciculus. Now, here is the deeply fascinating, highly specific vulnerability of the human brain. Verbs and adjectives are conceptual. They are spread out and distributed across vast, redundant networks of memory. If you forget the word run, you can easily substitute sprint, jog, or dash. But nouns, the names of specific objects, specific places, and specific people, are highly localized. They are stored in extremely specific, heavily guarded microscopic file folders located deep within the temporal pole of your brain. Retrieving a noun requires an incredibly precise, high-energy, perfectly targeted electrical signal. It is exactly like trying to find a single, specific book in a massive, sprawling, poorly lit library. The signal must travel with absolute, flawless precision, at breathtaking speed, to the exact correct shelf. When you experience that terrifying tip-of-the-tongue phenomenon, it is not because the memory of the word has been erased or destroyed. The book is still on the shelf. The terrifying reality is that the librarian, the electrical signal tasked with retrieving the word, simply did not have enough chemical energy to make the journey across the neural bridge. We must look even closer, down to the absolute microscopic level, to witness exactly where and how this retrieval signal violently collapses. Your vast neural network is not a single, continuous, unbroken wire. It is composed of roughly 86 billion individual neurons, and these neurons actually never physically touch one another. There is a microscopic, fluid-filled gap existing between every single connection, known as the synaptic cleft. In order for the command to retrieve that forgotten noun to successfully travel from one neuron to the next, it must physically cross this dangerous, empty chasm. The electrical signal cannot jump the gap on its own. Instead, when the electrical impulse reaches the very edge of the neuron, it must trigger the sudden, massive release of highly specialized chemical messengers known as neurotransmitters. You can visualize these neurotransmitters exactly like a fleet of microscopic ferry boats. They are suddenly launched across the fluid-filled gap, carrying the vital message to the receiving docks on the opposite neuron. The absolute most critical neurotransmitters responsible for the speed of processing, the sharp focus required for memory retrieval, and the rapid execution of complex language are dopamine and acetylcholine. If your brain does not have a massive, readily available, completely overflowing reserve of these specific chemical ferries, the electrical signal simply dies at the edge of the cliff. The message is lost. You stand there, mid-sentence, staring blankly, feeling a profound sense of panic as the noun completely escapes you. The modern medical establishment heavily focuses on trying to artificially stimulate the remaining ferries, using heavy pharmaceutical drugs. But they completely, tragically ignore the fundamental, foundational biological question. Why is your brain failing to manufacture these vital chemical messengers in the first place? The answer to that terrifying question lies in a deeply misunderstood biological process that has been quietly, insidiously failing inside your physical body for years, long before the very first word was ever forgotten. Your brain absolutely cannot magically conjure dopamine or acetylcholine out of thin air. It must painstakingly, physically manufacture them on a microscopic cellular assembly line. And the absolute non-negotiable raw materials required for this assembly line are highly specific biological molecules known as amino acids. Amino acids are the fundamental building blocks of all protein in the human body. To produce the dopamine required to rapidly retrieve a lost noun, your brain desperately, constantly requires a massive supply of an amino acid called L-Tyrosine. To maintain the structural integrity of the neural bridge itself, it requires vast amounts of structural amino acids like glycine and proline. Now, you might be thinking to yourself that you eat plenty of protein, that you consume chicken, fish, or beef on a regular basis, and therefore you should have plenty of these amino acids. This is exactly where the massive, tragic biological disconnect occurs in the aging human body. Swallowing a piece of protein is absolutely not the same thing as physically absorbing microscopic amino acids into your bloodstream. As human beings naturally age past their 50th decade, a completely silent, deeply devastating physiological decline occurs within the dark, acidic environment of the stomach. The highly specialized parietal cells lining your stomach wall simply begin to exhaust themselves, fundamentally failing to produce the massive, highly concentrated volumes of hydrochloric acid necessary to properly break down food. This invisible, highly common condition is known clinically as hypochlorhydria, or chronically low stomach acid. When you consume a dense piece of animal protein, it enters your stomach as a massive, deeply complex, tightly folded biological structure. In order to extract the life-saving, brain-protecting amino acids trapped inside, your stomach must rapidly bathe that protein in a pool of stomach acid that is so incredibly corrosive, so deeply powerful, that it registers between a 1 and a 2 on the pH scale. This extreme, violent acidity forcefully unravels the tight protein structures, a process called denaturing, allowing your digestive enzymes to finally rush in and snip the long protein chains into tiny, absorbable, individual amino acids. But if you are suffering from age-related low stomach acid, this critical unraveling completely fails to happen. The expensive, high-quality protein you are carefully eating simply sits heavily in your warm stomach, slowly putrefying rather than rapidly digesting. It eventually passes entirely through your gastrointestinal tract, completely unbroken down, acting as a massive burden on your digestive system, rather than a source of vital nourishment. You are quite literally starving your brain of the exact structural raw materials it desperately needs, while your stomach is completely full. Your brain sends the desperate signal to manufacture more dopamine to help you find the lost noun, but the biological factory floor is completely, tragically empty. This is the exact reason why simply trying to eat more meat or drinking massive, heavy, artificially flavored protein shakes fundamentally fails to restore your cognitive clarity. You are adding more heavy, complex raw material to a factory that has completely lost its ability to process it. We must completely bypass this heavily compromised digestive machinery and forcefully, clinically introduce the exact, highly refined amino acids your brain is screaming for. This brings us to the profound, highly actionable two-step amino acid protocol designed to aggressively, permanently restore your rapid verbal fluency and rebuild your cognitive resilience. Step 1 of this protocol requires immediately, actively repairing the deeply compromised digestive fire that has been silently starving your central nervous system for decades. We must artificially, safely, and highly strategically re-acidify the internal environment of your stomach just moments before you consume any protein-rich meal. This is accomplished entirely without the use of heavy pharmaceutical interventions. The most deeply researched, highly effective, and entirely natural biological tool for this precise task is a highly concentrated organic compound known as betaine hydrochloride. Betaine hydrochloride is a naturally occurring plant alkaloid, most heavily concentrated in deeply pigmented beets, that has been synthetically bound to an acidic molecule. When taken in a highly specific encapsulated form, roughly 15 to 20 minutes before your first bite of protein, the capsule safely dissolves in the stomach, releasing a powerful, highly localized surge of natural acidity. This massive, sudden drop in pH instantly, violently wakes up your dormant digestive enzymes, specifically pepsin, creating the exact optimal, aggressively acidic environment required to effortlessly shatter complex dietary proteins into microscopic, highly bioavailable amino acids. Now, it is absolutely vital to proactively address the deeply specific physical limitations that often accompany aging. If you are an individual currently struggling with a highly sensitive esophageal lining, a history of severe burning gastric ulcers, or if you are currently taking heavy prescription medication for severe acid reflux, introducing a highly acidic compound like betaine hydrochloride could cause significant, deeply uncomfortable physical irritation. You absolutely must not risk your physical safety to achieve this biological goal. You can brilliantly, effortlessly, completely bypass the harsh acidity by utilizing a remarkably gentle, deeply powerful alternative: systemic proteolytic enzymes. These are highly complex, naturally occurring plant-based enzymes, specifically bromelain, extracted deep from the core of tropical pineapples, and papain, sourced directly from raw papayas. These magnificent, gentle biological catalysts require absolutely no stomach acid to function. They are biologically designed to aggressively, ruthlessly seek out complex protein chains and effortlessly snip them apart in entirely neutral or even slightly alkaline environments. By simply taking a high-quality clinical-grade complex of these deeply soothing, plant-based enzymes immediately before your meal, you are mechanically guaranteeing the perfect, highly efficient breakdown of your dietary protein into vital amino acids without ever risking a single moment of painful gastric distress or dangerous acid rebound. Once we have brilliantly, flawlessly optimized your compromised digestive machinery, ensuring that the heavy doors of absorption are thrown wide open, we must immediately execute Step 2 of the protocol: the direct, highly concentrated infusion of the exact, specific amino acid precursors your brain requires to immediately begin rapidly synthesizing dopamine and rebuilding your synaptic communication. We are absolutely not going to wait for your newly repaired digestion to slowly extract these compounds from whole foods over the course of several agonizing weeks. We are going to aggressively, strategically flood your central nervous system with highly purified, clinically isolated, free-form amino acids. The absolute king of this cognitive restoration protocol is L-Tyrosine. When you consume L-Tyrosine in its completely isolated, free-form state, perfectly separated from any competing proteins, it fundamentally bypasses almost the entire arduous digestive process. It is instantaneously rapidly absorbed directly across the delicate mucosal lining of your small intestine, surging straight into your massive cardiovascular superhighway. Because it is highly concentrated and completely unopposed, it effortlessly rapidly crosses the highly restrictive, heavily guarded blood-brain barrier. Once safely inside the sanctuary of your central nervous system, L-Tyrosine is immediately ruthlessly seized by your starving neurons. Through a rapid two-step enzymatic conversion process, your brain forcefully transforms this raw amino acid directly into L-Dopa, and then instantly into massive, overflowing, heavily concentrated pools of pure, active dopamine. The biological result of this massive, deeply strategic dopamine surge is absolutely breathtaking. Suddenly, the vast, previously empty synaptic gaps separating your language centers are completely flooded with billions of newly manufactured chemical ferry boats. The electrical signal demanding the retrieval of that specific, stubborn noun no longer dies at the edge of the cliff. It is immediately, powerfully caught by the waiting dopamine and ferried across the chasm with razor-sharp, flawless, blinding speed. The mental fog heavily lifts. The deep, agonizing hesitation completely vanishes. You will begin to notice that you are no longer pausing in the middle of your sentences, desperately searching the ceiling for a forgotten word. You will recall deeply specific names, complex historical dates, and intricate conversational details with the exact same fluid, effortless, crystal-clear precision that you possessed in your early 30s. To achieve this profound, life-altering cognitive restoration, you must be highly strategic about your daily biological rhythm. L-Tyrosine must be taken strictly in the early morning, completely on an empty stomach, at least 45 long minutes before consuming any solid food or heavy dark coffee. This highly specific timing completely eliminates any internal competition from other dietary amino acids, violently guaranteeing that the L-Tyrosine is given absolute, undisputed priority access to the transportation channels leading directly into your living brain. But rapidly restoring the chemical dopamine drive is only half of the profound restorative equation. We must also aggressively, physically rebuild the degrading structural integrity of the neural bridge itself, the massive arcuate fasciculus connecting your thought to your speech. As we age, the heavy, thick myelin sheath that heavily insulates these long, vital nerve cables naturally begins to fray, significantly slowing the electrical transmission speed. To aggressively halt and brilliantly reverse this structural decay, we must continuously flood the system with highly specific, dense structural amino acids, primarily heavy concentrations of glycine and proline. For thousands of years, traditional ancient human cultures naturally, effortlessly obtained massive amounts of these exact structural building blocks through the slow, agonizingly long, heavily traditional boiling of animal bones, thick joints, and heavy connective tissues, creating deeply nourishing, highly concentrated bone broths. The modern, highly industrialized, incredibly rushed diet has almost entirely tragically eliminated these deeply necessary structural proteins from our daily existence. We consume heavily processed, incredibly lean muscle meats that are completely devoid of the specific, highly complex amino acids required to physically construct the protective sheathing of our nervous system. To seamlessly, effortlessly reintroduce these vital, deeply protective building blocks into your daily routine, without spending 48 hours boiling massive bones in your kitchen, you must incorporate a highly purified, enzymatically hydrolyzed collagen peptide isolate directly into your daily protocol. Hydrolyzed simply means that the massive, highly complex, entirely indigestible collagen structures have been pre-digested in a clinical laboratory. They have been broken down into microscopic, highly soluble, incredibly absorbable biological fragments. Because these fragments are completely tasteless and dissolve instantly in warm liquid, this vital intervention is remarkably easy to implement, regardless of any severe dental issues, highly painful chewing limitations, or deeply uncomfortable swallowing difficulties you may be currently facing. By simply stirring 2 heavy, concentrated scoops of highly purified, grass-fed collagen peptides directly into your morning tea, your warm oatmeal, or a gentle, soothing soup, you are effortlessly, completely passively flooding your central nervous system with the exact raw structural materials it requires to physically thicken, heavily insulate, and profoundly armor the microscopic wiring of your brilliant mind. By deeply, aggressively repairing your highly compromised digestive fire, rapidly flooding your starving brain with free-form L-Tyrosine to violently rebuild your dopamine reserves, and heavily fortifying your delicate neural architecture with deeply penetrating collagen peptides, you are entirely transforming your biological environment. You are no longer helplessly, passively waiting for the next terrifying cognitive slip to occur. You are actively, fiercely taking absolute control of your own neurological destiny. You are physically, mechanically guaranteeing that the deep, beautiful continuity of your thoughts, the rapid, flawless eloquence of your speech, and the absolute, unyielding power of your personal independence are powerfully preserved, fiercely protected, and continuously celebrated for long, wonderful decades yet to come. You will no longer fear the silence in the middle of a conversation, because you will possess the profound biological certainty that the bridge between your brilliant mind and your spoken word is structurally perfect, heavily reinforced, and brilliantly alive. However, completely rebuilding your neurotransmitter pathways and flooding your brain with vital amino acids is utterly, entirely useless if those newly repaired, highly delicate neural bridges are being actively, aggressively corroded by a massive, invisible toxic assault occurring every single time you prepare a meal. You have successfully fixed the biological software of your mind, but a deeply common, highly dangerous heavy metal currently sitting right inside your kitchen cabinets is quietly, violently destroying the hardware. To immediately discover the terrifying hidden kitchen staple that is actively poisoning your hippocampus, and the incredibly simple, completely free household swap you must make tonight to permanently stop the neurological bleeding, you need to click the video currently displayed on your screen right now.